The medieval era witnessed the emergence of one of history's most mysterious organizations, the Knights Templar. Originating from the chaotic period following the First Crusade, this military group started as a modest band of knights committed to safeguarding pilgrims journeying along perilous routes to Jerusalem. Their transformation from simple guardians to an unparalleled force that swayed both monarchs and popes stands as one of the most extraordinary institutional evolutions during the Middle Ages. These warrior monks operated with exceptional independence, reporting solely to the Pope and rising above the usual feudal duties. Their iconic white cloaks adorned with red crosses became widely recognized symbols throughout Europe and the Middle East, evoking both respect and dread. Within a short period, the Templars grew beyond a small protective fraternity into a complex entity that merged military skill with groundbreaking financial innovations. Their legacy spans nearly 200 years, from 1119 to 1312 AD, intersecting with key historical developments such as the Crusades, the rise of early banking systems, and the changing power relations between medieval Europe and the Islamic world. The order's dramatic downfall, marked by charges of heresy, secretive trials, and public executions, remains one of history's most infamous episodes of political intrigue. What makes the tale of the Templars especially fascinating is how it reflects the deep contradictions within medieval Christianity. Warrior monks who pledged solemn vows, yet wielded immense worldly influence and power. In a world where extreme poverty coexisted with immense wealth, religious figures played roles in diplomacy alongside Muslim leaders while defending Christendom. Ironically, the gravest threats they faced ultimately originated from the very European powers they had faithfully served for years. In the year 1119, 9 French knights approached King Baldwin II of Jerusalem with a groundbreaking idea for a new type of religious order. This pivotal moment launched an organization that would profoundly alter medieval politics, finance, and warfare. Known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, the Knights Templar emerged during a time of significant change. By the end of the 11th century, Europe found itself at the crossroads of faith, power, and ambition. To fully grasp the birth of this extraordinary military order, one must first explore the intricate environment from which it sprang. Europe was shaped by feudalism, a dominant church, and an increasing fascination with the Holy Land. Medieval society was organized in a hierarchy where individuals were bound by mutual duties of service and protection. Monarchs sat at the top, although their actual power was often limited. Under them, powerful nobles controlled large lands through networks of vassals who exchanged military service for land and safety. This fragmented political system created a patchwork of competing authorities. Throughout the continent, conflicts over power and land frequently led to violence and shaped daily life. The Catholic Church emerged as a unifying force that went beyond political borders. By the end of the 11th century, it had transformed into the most influential and widespread institution in Western Europe. Reforms initiated in previous decades had increased the Church's autonomy from secular rulers and placed authority firmly under the Pope. Religious beliefs deeply impacted all facets of medieval life, from the highest levels of royal governance to the daily habits of peasants. Christian principles created the moral lens through which people interpreted their existence and their role in the world. During the papacy of Gregory VII, who governed from 1073 until 1085, the Church began to push for dominance over secular leaders in what historians refer to as the investiture conflict. This major dispute revolved around whether emperors or popes held the right to appoint key religious figures, but also symbolized a larger debate about the balance between spiritual and earthly power. The moment when Emperor Henry IV was humiliated at Canossa in 1077, reportedly standing barefoot in the snow for 3 days, pleading for the Pope's pardon, highlighted the increasing authority of Roman religious leadership. While these changes were unfolding in Europe, a completely different culture was thriving far to the east. In the Mediterranean region, the Islamic world of the 11th century stood as the height of achievement across many disciplines. Spanning from Baghdad to Cordoba, Muslim scholars safeguarded and built upon ancient Greek knowledge, making significant progress in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and architecture. While European societies stayed relatively undeveloped in comparison, the Holy City carried deep religious importance for Christians, Muslims, and Jews alike. For Muslims, it was considered their third holiest site after Mecca and Medina. The dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque appeared as stunning symbols of Islamic devotion to this long-established spiritual center. Since the 7th century conquest led by Caliph Umar, Muslim rulers generally allowed Christian pilgrims to visit holy places, although the conditions changed under various governments. By the middle of the 11th century, control of the Holy Land belonged to the Fatimid Caliphate of Egypt. Yet stability in the region weakened as the Seljuk Turks, who had recently embraced Islam, expanded their territory by force. Their triumph over Byzantine forces at Manzikert in 1071 severely weakened the Eastern Roman Empire and shifted the power dynamic throughout the area. The advance of the Seljuks endangered traditional pilgrimage routes and heightened Western fears about maintaining access to these sacred locations. For centuries, Christians embarked on challenging journeys to Palestine driven by deep devotion. These pilgrimages served as both spiritual endeavors and acts of repentance, with many convinced that praying at holy sites granted unique blessings and absolution of sins. By the end of the 11th century, these religious travels became increasingly dangerous. Pilgrims confronted not only natural dangers such as illness, hunger, and severe weather, but also the ever-present menace of bandit raids. This was especially critical for fragile travelers carrying precious offerings meant for sacred places. Stories of abuse against Christian pilgrims, whether exaggerated or true, spread across Europe. These narratives resonated in a continent already undergoing a religious awakening and a strengthened focus on personal piety. The idea of armed pilgrimages, uniting spiritual devotion with military efforts, began to take hold in Western minds. Against this scene, the Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos sent representatives to Pope Urban II seeking help to fight the Seljuk Turks. Although the main aim was to recover lost Byzantine lands, this request sparked a much broader movement. At the Council of Clermont in November of the year 1095, the Pope delivered a speech that would change history forever. Urban's message skillfully mixed intense religious passion with political strategy. He urged Christians to take up arms and respond to the call for aid. Warriors were urged to stop fighting each other and instead focus their combined strength on reclaiming the sacred city. The phrase Deus vult, meaning God wills it, quickly became the uniting battle cry, inspiring thousands to take up the cross and sew it onto their clothing as a sign of their holy commitment to free the birthplace of Christ. The Pope provided significant spiritual rewards for taking part, including a full indulgence that promised forgiveness of all temporal penalties for sins. For medieval Christians, who greatly worried about their salvation, this divine incentive was incredibly compelling. Furthermore, the Eastern expedition presented a chance for younger noble sons, those unlikely to inherit their family estates, to gain wealth, land, and fame in faraway regions. Thus began the First Crusade, a historic military campaign starting in the year 1096 that rallied tens of thousands from Western Europe. After the catastrophic failure of the People's Crusade, led by Peter the Hermit, which ended in slaughter, the main Crusader forces, mainly consisting of French and Norman knights, set out in August of that same year. Despite great challenges, these troops conquered Antioch in June of 1098 after a long and exhausting siege. Finally, they reached their ultimate goal by June of 1999. The siege of the Holy City lasted just over a month before the walls were broken down on July 15th of 1999. What came next is remembered as one of the darkest episodes in Crusader history, a ruthless massacre of Muslim and Jewish inhabitants. The inhabitants shocked even contemporary chroniclers, as described by Raymond of Aguilas, an eyewitness who recounted Christian fighters wading ankle-deep in blood at the Temple Mount. Although these descriptions were likely exaggerated, they reveal the intense brutality that marked the conquest. Once their goals were achieved, the victorious armies founded the Kingdom of Jerusalem, along with several other Crusader states, collectively called Outre-mer, meaning the land beyond the sea. Godfrey of Bouillon became the first leader of the newly acquired lands, taking the modest title defender of the Holy Sepulchre instead of king. After his death in the year 1100, his brother Baldwin I took the crown, starting a dynasty that ruled the sacred city for almost 90 years. This extraordinary triumph, however, brought significant difficulties. Most crusaders went back to Europe after fulfilling their religious promises, leaving the fledgling Christian territories seriously understaffed. The remaining European settlers formed a minority that governed mainly the urban centres and critical trade routes, but did not control the rural areas around them. Their continued existence depended heavily on securing reliable lines to Europe for reinforcements, supplies, and new inhabitants. This fragile condition made travel between the coastal harbours and inland holy places extremely risky. Local hostile groups still occupied much of the nearby land, and robbers frequently targeted religious pilgrims along these exposed roads, making movement dangerous and uncertain. Christian pilgrims who had already endured challenging journeys by land and sea often fell prey to violence before arriving at their holy destinations. It was within these dangerous circumstances that a French knight named Hugues de Payens devised an innovative solution, a religious order exclusively devoted to the armed defense of pilgrims. In the year 1119, barely 20 years following the triumph of the initial crusade, he and 8 fellow knights took solemn vows in the presence of Patriarch Warrand and King Baldwin II. They founded the humble brotherhood known as the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, which would later evolve into the renowned military order that reshaped medieval society. During the early 1200s, as Christian travelers continued to encounter lethal threats on their routes to sacred locations, Hugues de Payens stood out as a man with remarkable foresight and resolve. This French knight, hailing from Champagne and battle-hardened by participation in the First Crusade, understood that the newly formed Kingdom of Jerusalem was critically exposed. Its foremost weakness was the lack of protection for pilgrims journeying through its lands. Driven by a mix of religious fervour and practical necessity, Hugues assembled 8 knights who shared his mission. Historical archives mention some of their names: Godfrey de Saint-Omer, Payen de Montdidier, Hugues de Saint-André, André de Montbard, Geoffrey Bissol, and Gondomar. These men embodied the elite of European knighthood, skilled warriors proficient in mounted combat. These warriors brought extensive battlefield experience. What set their mission apart from ordinary nighttime operations was its spiritual essence. In a solemn ritual before King Baldwin II and Patriarch War, these 9 knights committed themselves by taking monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. This was an unprecedented blend of religious devotion and military skill. They devoted themselves to a unique purpose: providing armed protection for vulnerable pilgrims journeying along the perilous paths linking the coastal port of Jaffa with the sacred inland sites. Their timing was fortunate. King Baldwin II saw the potential importance of such a devoted protective group. The young kingdom was constantly threatened by surrounding Muslim territories, while its modest military forces were stretched thin defending cities and vital fortresses. A mobile unit assigned specifically to secure travel routes answered a crucial demand that the royal army could not sufficiently fulfill. In a move with lasting historical impact, Baldwin granted this newly formed brotherhood quarters on the Temple Mount, within a wing of his royal palace beside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This place carried immense symbolic meaning. Built over the remains believed by Christians to be Solomon's temple, it symbolized the spiritual center of the holy city. From this prestigious base, the knights derived their name, the poor fellow soldiers of the temple. The selection of the Temple Mount as their headquarters held several layers of significance. From a practical standpoint, it offered a key position to coordinate their patrol efforts. Symbolically, it linked the group to ancient biblical traditions of holy protection. Some historians believe the founders may have drawn inspiration from the accounts of the Levites who once safeguarded Solomon's original temple. This association with sacred heritage became a crucial part of the order's identity and aura. Although they enjoyed royal endorsement, the Brotherhood began with very limited means. Historical records depict them as so poor that two knights often had to share one horse. This image was later immortalized in their well-known emblem showing two riders on a single mount. Their initial gear mainly included donated clothing and weapons, and they depended heavily on charitable donations for their basic needs. This authentic poverty mirrored their monastic commitments and set them apart from the often flashy nature of worldly knighthood. Their everyday work involved escorting pilgrims along treacherous routes, especially the pathway from the coastal port at Jaffa through bandit territories to holy sites. Drawing on tactics developed during the Crusades, they arranged travelers into guarded groups, placed armed knights both at the front and back, and kept a close watch to prevent surprise attacks. Historical records recognize that they swiftly lowered pilgrim fatalities by implementing organized protective strategies. For close to 10 years, the Brotherhood functioned in this modest role, steadily earning a reputation for disciplined efficiency and religious commitment. However, despite their effective methods, they encountered doubt from both religious and secular groups. The idea of warrior monks appeared contradictory to many medieval perspectives. Established monastic orders focused on peace, humility, and detachment from worldly matters, while knightly virtues praised combat skill, honor, and worldly glory. By merging these seemingly opposing principles, the Temple Knights disrupted existing social norms. The European religious hierarchy was especially uneasy about armed monks. They questioned how men who shed blood, even for just causes, could live up to the spiritual demands of monastic life. This theological dilemma needed resolution before the Brotherhood could earn broader acceptance and backing. Their unusual role also stirred practical concerns regarding oversight and responsibility. As knights, should they be accountable to secular rulers, or as monks were they subject to church authority? Their unique status between these realms created governance uncertainties that worried both royal officials and church leaders. Nonetheless, the tangible benefits of their work fostered increasing support, inspiring other knights by their example. Those who wished to join their ranks were inspired by the benefits gained from their protection. Pilgrims shared stories about their effectiveness, spreading their reputation widely across Christendom. Their unique look, at first marked only by simple white cloaks representing pure intentions, soon became familiar along the routes to the Holy Land. News of this groundbreaking order eventually reached powerful figures in Europe, especially Bernard, the abbot of Clairvaux, who was the nephew of one of the original knights, André de Montbard. Bernard held unmatched moral influence as the foremost religious leader of his time. His intellectual brilliance and holy reputation made him an ideal promoter for the young brotherhood. Although Bernard initially doubted the idea of armed monks, he gradually saw their potential as protectors of justice. Hugh de Payens understood that for his order to grow, it required formal acknowledgement from the highest authorities of Western Christendom. Around the year 1127, almost 10 years after the order's founding, he led a small group to Europe to seek papal endorsement and new recruits. This journey would change the humble brotherhood into something far greater than its original creators ever imagined. The timing of this mission to Europe coincided with growing worries about the safety of the Crusader states. Recent military defeats had revealed how vulnerable they were. Christian lands in the east were sparking renewed interest in backing their protection. Hughes cleverly framed his order as part of the answer to this urgent challenge. These devoted fighters combined deep religious commitment with effective military skills. While journeying across France, England, Scotland, and Flanders, Hughes captured significant attention from the nobility, who were impressed by the order's purpose. His most crucial opportunity came during the Council of Troy in January of 1129, where a gathering of church leaders met to decide on the Brotherhood's official standing. There, with the powerful support of Bernard of Clairvaux, the humble warrior monks obtained formal church approval. This council represented a pivotal moment for the order's evolution. Under Bernard's direction, a formal code was created for the Brotherhood, drawing inspiration from Benedictine and Cistercian customs, but adjusted to fit their specific military role. This set of rules defined both their spiritual duties and their combat responsibilities, laying the groundwork for the order's growth as an institution. Bernard further solidified their mission by writing a treatise in praise of the new knighthood, offering a theological defense for armed monks that addressed many religious doubts about their dual nature. The rule also outlined a clear leadership structure with a Grand Master at the helm, supported by several officers, including the Seneschal, Marshal, and Draper. It detailed their daily rituals and operations. Religious rituals took place alongside military exercises, creating a well-organized lifestyle that balanced sacred commitments with combat responsibilities. This also introduced rigid rules of conduct. Knights were prohibited from hunting merely for pleasure, gambling, or involvement with women, including female relatives. Their attire was controlled meticulously, even specifying the length of their hair and beards, forming a severe and disciplined appearance that distinguished them sharply from secular knights. After receiving formal acknowledgement, Pope Honorius II placed the order under direct papal supervision, freeing them from duties to local bishops and civil authorities. This remarkable independence became essential for their growth, enabling them to function beyond political borders as a global institution accountable solely to Rome. The plain white cloak that had served as their original symbol now gained official importance. Pope Eugenius III added a red cross to it as a sign of sacrifice. This bold emblem became their most famous icon, inspiring admiration and sometimes intimidation across 2 continents. With the Church's backing and expanding renown, contributions began pouring into the order from all over Europe. Wealthy aristocrats donated lands, fortresses, and revenues to sustain their cause. Young knights, especially younger sons lacking inheritances, increasingly sought to join. What started as 9 knights sharing horses grew within 10 years into a powerful, influential institution. A globally acknowledged organization with rapidly expanding assets, the Brothers of the Temple returned to the sacred land after their mission in Europe, bringing with them not only fresh members and material riches, but also a renewed sense of identity. They were no longer just a local protective brotherhood, but had evolved into the first military religious order in Christian history, an innovative entity destined to transform warfare finance and spiritual life in ways their modest founders could hardly foresee. The Crusader states formed after the initial crusade existed in a political arena unlike anything found in Europe at that time. Collectively called Outramare, meaning the land beyond the sea, these Christian territories carved out of Muslim-ruled lands represented a distinctive experiment in medieval rule. To grasp the